So here we are, KVM over IP, a technology whose time has come. Principally, I want to talk about the whole concept of sending KVM over IP with reference to Amulet Hotkey, because we think that's the best product we've found so far to address this. What does that mean, KVM over IP? KVM, keyboard, video, mouse. So you know, your control surface, your keyboard, your mouse, maybe your Wacom tablet, maybe your audio control surface. And also your two monitors. Maybe you've got two 24-inch monitors. Maybe you've got a big 30-inch monitor. But whatever your editing interface is, how do we extend that over a regular commodity-type computer network so that we don't have to rely on fibre optic cabling, we don't have to rely on other elaborate things to get that control surface from the machine room into the edit suite or wherever else you want it to be. It might be within the building, might be the MCR to the edit room just down the corridor, the grading room, the audio room, whatever. Might be across the campus. Maybe the studio operator wants to take control of an Avid so he can start capturing the studio shoot and he's half a mile away at in the studio. Or maybe it's further. Maybe it's across the public internet and you want to take control of that Avid in your hotel room, maybe at home. You know, heaven forbid that people have to go home and do work, but you know, it happens. And so this is a technology that really enables this way of working. And the point that has to be made from the outset, because we're all very used to VNC and Windows Remote Desktop and technologies like that, is that ideally neither the user nor the operating system of the workstation should be aware that it's being operated from afar. So here's something, a real trip down memory lane. A couple of photographs that I've taken over my career. There's a picture of Studio 2 at Television Centre in 1980, never you mind, and an Oasis TV's Edit 5 from about 20 years ago. And you can see some common things there. There's big equipment, big Grass Valley Vision mixers, ADO digital video effects machines, Quantel digital video effects, you know, old-fashioned tape edit controllers, that kind of equipment, which implied a big machine room. It implied large machine room with raised floors, lots of power, lots of air conditioning. Look at that chap, front of frame. He looks very cocky, doesn't he? He hasn't got as much grey hair as he has now, but anyway. And standard control signals. RS422 for control panels, analog video for status feeds, that kind of thing. All very easy to extend and all very much a known quantity to the kind of engineers who were building those systems. But of course, come the mid-80s, mid-90s, everything changed. And we're all now starting to work very much on workstation-type editing applications. That chap looks very, very proud of his version 1 media composer, doesn't he? But clearly, his equipment is now not sitting in a machine room down the corridor. It's sitting on his desk or under his desk. And the only interaction he really has to worry about is maybe picking up a control of a VTR in the machine room. But pretty much all the hard stuff is being done on his desk. And so you kind of think that the need for extending, the need for remoting equipment has pretty much gone away, but not so much. I mean, there's a few contemporary requirements there. Maybe your editing workstation, maybe that has to be attached to the high-speed shared storage in your machine room, perhaps over fibre channel, perhaps over high-speed Ethernet, 10 gig Ethernet perhaps. And you don't want to have to extend those things all the way across the building into the edit suite. Maybe you have the kind of workflow where you have to constantly reassign workstations. Perhaps you've got editors who are supported by a team of ingest operators, and they need to take control of workstations and move them around the facility. Heat and power as well. You know, even a modern Mac Pro or a Hewlett-Packard Z series workstation is a noisy, hot piece of equipment, which is ideally not housed in the Hero suite, where the client just wants to hear his Perrier water bubbling away. That's all he wants. And so the methods we've been using really for the last 10 years for achieving extension of KVM is for the most part, DVI balance, where we use fibre optic cables to extend those DVI signals, the displays, the two 24-inch monitors or the big 30-inch monitor, into the edit room. And that's the real technical challenge of the way this all works. That's, you know, for two 24-inch monitors, we're talking about two 1.65 gigabit per second data streams. And that doesn't fit down an Ethernet cable. Well, it kind of does if you can employ some modest compression. And some manufacturers do that. They have systems that employ very modest compression and can send that packetized data over a gigabit connection. But they swamp the network. They really do require special consideration when you're building your network to support that. Or, in the case of Amulet, which we think is the better way to do it, you can use very aggressive and adaptive compression. So typically, for systems based around Amulet, which we're showing today, MPEG-4 is deployed for any video content that's found within the interface. So on your Avid Media Composer, the playback window, the system will identify that as video and it will use something like MPEG-4 to compress that. For text and things like that, it will deploy a PostScript engine for compressing the text. And then everything else, graphics and everything else, pretty much gets hit by a run length encoder. And by using that very aggressive, very adaptive compression, you can achieve quite splendid compression rates that work very well over commodity Ethernet networks. So here's a couple of examples of Amulet's product line. On the left-hand side there, you can see there's a photograph from a couple of cabinets at ITV's newest build in Salford, in Media City, in Manchester. And there's a couple of Amulet card cages. Each one of these cards will support a single workstation, a single dual-headed workstation in this case, although they do quad and 8-head workstations. And they essentially, each one of those cards is getting the workstation in question, be it a Mac Pro, perhaps running Premiere or Avid, or a PC-type workstation, maybe running Smoke or Avid or whatever. It's getting it onto the Amulet network. And the other way of doing it is an internal card, as you can see on the right-hand side of the slide there. And that's pretty much exactly the same gadget, except this sits inside the PC. This sits inside the machine and uses the machine's power and all those other support things you find inside a computer. But it's got a network out and a DVI in, and it does exactly the same job as the external card cage components. There's compelling reasons for using either system. Obviously, an internal card is a much cheaper piece. It's not an expensive item, whereas if you've got card cages, you've got to pay for the card cage and the power supplies and everything else. But having said that, putting an internal card inside a Media Composer or inside an Autodesk Smoke or Flame workstation violates the standard specification for that manufacturer, and they get very sniffy about supporting that machine subsequently. And maybe you wanted to extend an embedded system, not a computer, maybe a Tektronix waveform monitor or something like that, which uses DVI and USB, but would be convenient to extend this way. But whatever way you kind of build your estate, you can have a mixed environment, and all of those different client-end systems will work with the desktop box that sits in the edit suite, which they call the zero client, the zero configuration client. And there's one here on the desk, and if you go downstairs, you can see some other examples as well. This one is a dual-headed one, so this one will support two 24-inch monitors maximum. But one of the ones we have downstairs will support up to 4 30-inch monitors, so 4 dual-link DVI monitors. And they have variations that will support up to 8 monitors. And the reason for that is that they come from a financial services background where traders and investment bankers kind of measure their worth by the number of monitors that are on their desk. 8 monitors apparently is not uncommon if you're working for a big bank. So some compelling reasons for choosing Amulet or a similar type system. Network collaboration. It is the case that the Ethernet networks are ubiquitous. There's Cat5, Cat6, Cat7 cable running throughout all our facilities, and we've got big racks of switches in our machine rooms, and even the smallest sort of boutique facility will have a little closet where you've got an Ethernet switch and those kind of things. Industry standard connection brokering. If you have a decent-sized estate of Amulet seats, it's very advantageous to be able to have username, password, and proper authentication. And whether you choose to have a local database of username, password, and user group type information, or whether you want to deprecate that upstream to your Windows domain controller or to your LDAP server, that's all very doable with Amulet. Or they even have a very lightweight management console where if all you want is somebody in the bookings department to be able to say, okay, what are the jobs today? Edit 1's got control of Smoke 2, Edit 2's got control of Avid 3, and I make those connections. The editors need never be aware that somebody from afar is hooking up workstations to their edit suites. And we've got one particularly big VFX house who work their network exactly that way. Industry standard encryption. So if you come under FACT or MPA, you do feature film work, then having something that's encrypted to at least AES 128 is a necessity. You can't work for a big film company if you're sending high-resolution media across your network unencrypted. Now you might say, well, it's well nigh impossible to tap this stuff and to be able to make a recording of it. But FACT and the MPA won't accept that. They'll want to see a system that has proper levels of encryption to a recognised industry standard. No single point of failure. There's one manufacturer who bases their entire KVM routing system around a central matrix. Just imagine the horror when you come in the morning and that's failed, and not a single person in the facility can grab control of their workstation. Well, basing it around a commodity network running over Ethernet, using Ethernet switches, means that there is no single point of failure. And in the case of Amulet, even the connection broker server can go down, and all connections remain persistent, new connections can be made, and even if you introduce new machines onto the network after the connection broker's gone down, there's still a method of making the connections to those machines. So there's no single point of failure inside an Amulet network. Amulet is based around Teradici. Teradici is the chipset manufactured by a Canadian company, and it's implemented in many, many vendors. So it's the standard for remote display that VMware uses. Samsung, LG, and others have got monitors that have this in the monitor. So in the back of the monitor, there's an Ethernet port, and they support the standard straight into the back of the monitor. Dell Blade servers, they support that at the server end. So if you've got a big estate of Dell Blade servers nowadays, you can use your Amulet Edit Suite box end to access those. So the point I'm trying to make with this bullet point is that if there is an industry standard for remote desktops over IP, it's probably going to be Teradici. On a per-seat basis, Amulet is the best value of any of the systems we've considered. So of the 4 big manufacturers we've looked at in the last year, and had in and tested and visited and done diligence on their offerings, Amulet for us has turned out to be the cheapest on a per-seat basis. And it's a proven technology. In the last 18 months, we've rolled it out at a very big broadcaster, in production, post-production facilities, and in VFX facilities. So there are lots of people, hundreds of editors today, sitting, looking at their edit screens, unaware that their workstation has been extended to them over an IP Ethernet type network. And just to illustrate the sort of ubiquity of Teradici products, here's a grab from their website, and you can see on the drop down there, Amulet is merely one of many big names you'll recognise who are implementing Teradici in their products. And in fact, look at the scroll bar, that's less than half of the big names, you know, who are currently implementing Teradici solutions. So, in the principle of kind of eating your own dog food, always using the things that you say are the best, I'm going to show you a few things. Now, we're actually running this demo on the Media Composer downstairs, and it's coming to us over this rather tatty bit of Cat5 cable that's going out through the window, down through the rain, and back in through another window downstairs. So that's how it's getting to us. Hopefully, your facilities are better wired than that. But I'm going to disconnect so I'll take you through how you acquire an Amulet connection. And this projector always takes a little while to relock to a different resolution. There we go. So here's typically what you see with the Amulet user interface. You can change the logo. In fact, ITV have got all theirs branded thus. When I hit connect, it goes off, it scuttles across the network. Because we're not running a connection broker server on this network, because we don't need to, we've only got 2 or 3 machines, it goes across the network and it discovers who's available. Now, of course, we haven't got a console management server or a connection broker server on the network, so it's just presenting us with IP addresses. Ordinarily, you get a much more friendly version of what's available to you, but for today, we'll deal with IP addresses. So I hit the connect button, and again, our projector's taking a little while to resync. There we go. We're back to the Avid that's downstairs. So if I minimise this PDF that's running the presentation and go there, look, there's everybody's favourite editing client. Fantastic, Media Composer. So if I start playing back the little sequence that's cut on that window, there we go. Look at that, coming across the network. And neither Media Composer nor the operating system running on this Z820 workstation is aware that it's been extended over a TCP/IP network. We have, up in Manchester at ITV, we have 20-odd rooms all editing over this system, and about 70 seats in total because their graphics department and various other people around the place use it. And we haven't had a single complaint in 6 months about, you know, oh, it looks blocky or it's not responsive or whatever. So we're entirely confident that this is an entirely usable system for proper editing. Now, if I bring up the web interface into the desktop box that I'm playing with here, it's showing us a few statistics. And we can see the sort of minimum, average, maximum bandwidth that the system's chewing up. Now look at this. Just over 1,000 kilobits per second, just over a megabit per second, the box has chewed up so far. Running that video, running the user interface, windows being dragged around. Can you tell this is coming in over an IP network? And even worse than that, an IP network that is intentionally restricted to 8 megabits per second. We're talking about domestic ADSL type data rates, but is only really chewing up just over a megabit per second of bandwidth. So rather than gigabit Ethernet speeds, we're looking at the kind of networks that we had in facilities 15 years ago to support this. It's very modest in its requirements. So back to the presentation. And I'll just wrap up by telling you some of the recent updates that we've kind of driven Amulet through. Because when we came to Amulet about 18 months ago, their background is in financial services. They support dealer desks and that kind of thing. In fact, they've just installed a big 4,000-seat financial centre in Sydney, in Australia, all entirely extended over their system, all going back to a data centre 10 miles out of town. So if you're working at that bank, your computer is 10 miles away, and you're not even aware of it. But when we sort of came to them and became a partner with them, they were very surprised that film and television people might want to extend workstations. Who thought of that kind of thing? And there were one or two things about their system which kind of needed changing, really. Principally USB 2 peripheral support. When we first came to Amulet, their system would really only support what we call HID devices, keyboards, mice, that kind of thing. But over the last year, they've extended that out to support Wacom tablets, even the really badly behaved Bamboo tablets, which are the current model Wacoms, which really take liberties with the USB specification. Controlled surfaces like Yukons and the kind of things you might use with Avid or with Pro Tools. And they're currently working on providing support for the film like Blackboard control surface. So they've been very responsive from an engineering perspective. Dual Link, initially their Dual Link support was very weak. And although not many people use 30-inch monitors for editing, a few people do, but now they've got their product range is entirely Dual Link DVI supporting. OS X's temporal dithering problem. You might not know, but if you went and bought an Apple Cinema display today, it's still an 8-bit panel. It's still an 8-bit display. And of course, all the people who manufacture graphics cards, like ATI Radeon, and now owned by AMD, and NVIDIA, they know this, and their Mac display drivers intentionally do this thing called temporal dithering, where each pixel, they dither either side of the colour they're trying to display, which gives the optical illusion of a slightly greater colour depth than you really should have. However, consider this for a compression system. Every frame of video is now 110% different from the frame that came before it. And so any compression system that relies on inter-field compression, inter-frame compression, just doesn't work. And so we found that for some Apple workstations, the picture quality was just awful. We got Amulet in, they looked at it and they said, yep, that's temporal dithering. And within 6 weeks, they'd written us kernel extensions for OS X for both ATI and Radeon cards to expose that setting so we could turn it off. And in fact, now we've got several places. NBC Universal, all their film editing department runs Media Composer on Mac Pros, and it's not an issue for them anymore since Amulet wrote the kernel extensions for it. They've also upped their support to dual, quad, and 8-way displays, which is probably not a great consideration in television, but it's a fantastic demo to see. A couple of application-specific considerations. Media Composer. If you're an Avid editor, you will no doubt be aware that if you unplug a monitor and plug it back in while Avid is running, Avid blows a little wobbler and says, oh, it's a change of resolution, I've got to restart the application. You think to yourself, well, that shouldn't be a problem. What am I doing replugging my monitors if I'm in an editing session? Well, consider ITV's case, where quite often their editor will finish his cut, he'll start the layback, he'll phone his operator who works in the media department and say, I'm finished, I'm going home, can you just watch the rest of the layback and just make sure it goes down to tape properly? And he hits disconnect on his Amulet box, expecting his Oppo to pick up control on his Amulet box and watch the rest of the layback. Of course, as soon as the operator picks up control on his Amulet box, Avid throws a wobbler and says, oh, change monitor, I've got to restart. And we've had to produce some little hardware modifications to address that. So that's kind of a done deal. Smoke on Linux. If you're running Smoke or Flame or any of the other Autodesk products on Linux as opposed to Mac, They do a couple of crafty little things with their EDID exchanges that mean that they can detect whether you're using a non-approved extender. And again, it's just something we've had to address. So both of those issues are kind of covered now. And I suppose in summary, you know, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. We've got lots and lots of these things out in the market now, being used for lots of serious television, VFX, production and post-production work. And we found Amulet to be a very responsive partner. From an engineering point of view, they're based in Britain. Their main facility is in Devon, but they've got big offices in Tower Bridge, London Bridge. And they've just been very responsive from an engineering point of view. And so we have no hesitation about recommending them as a very capable KVM over IP provider.